The world has promised to make net zero carbon in the future, but our living world is nowhere near this. Climate change is one of the major environmental issues in the world. It causes an adverse effect to human life. Most of this comes from human activities. To follow up the issue, then countries try to solve it by taking measures to reduce the emissions. Governments around the world have set net zero carbon targets for 2050 or earlier, while national parliaments and local governments are declaring a climate emergency, and there is considerably increased public concern about climate change. The importance of personal actions as compared with wider system change is a matter of public discussion. It is clear that governments will need new policies to help meet their very challenging net zero targets. After experiencing the dynamics of the pandemic, we are moving towards the new normal, where the activity is back alive as before. One thing that should be highlighted for all of us is an issue that has never been solved so far, and that is carbon trading. Instead of providing statistics that go down after the pandemic, there are fewer carbon emissions during the pandemic. Our government sets out a vision for controlling it. Taking into consideration that Indonesia is one of the lungs of the planet, its potential is tremendous in leading the implementation of carbon credit trading. Indonesia has set an unconditional target to reduce emissions by 29% and an unconditional target to reduce emissions by 41% with business as usual by 2030. This thing needs to have an action to get rid. In fact, in 2018, Indonesia's greenhouse gas GHG emissions level were at 542 metric tons, an increase of 313.47% from 1990 levels, plus fossil CO2 emissions in Indonesia were 530,035,650 tons in 2016.
And because of that, an act such as green economy need to be actuated by government, especially Indonesia. Because if we don't do this, many things will happen, like the atmosphere that we respirate every day has been bad, and more furtherly, many animal vegetation has been lost because of this carbon. January 2020, the government of Indonesia has been make a policy B30. That is a policy for reducing the usage of fossil fuel emission carbon. Because the B30 is a biodiesel mixed from 30% of crude palm oil and 70% of solar. Even more, the government of Indonesia aiming for tax carbon for the future. Tax carbon result will use for the people for funds for climate change issue resolve. So the conclusion that we can get is the government need to realizing their policies, especially tax carbon, because that is appropriate according to green economic goals to increase the social welfare and equality of community while significantly reducing the risk of environmental damage.